I've never wanted to speak a different language more, so I could just come up and do this whole presentation in German just to mess with all y'all. I think that'd be awesome, but I, alas, cannot do that, so I will stick with English. Hello, my name is Brooks Lybrand. I look like this on the internet. My handle is @BrooksLybrand at everything. I'm a developer relations manager at Shopify. This is my lovely wife sporting some Remix swag. These are the two big dogs that we own collectively. I show you these pictures to form an emotional connection so that you know that they're carbon-based entities that do love me, because I am going to be talking about React Router and I'm going to be talking about major versions, and those two different ideas, especially when combined together, cause anxiety in some of the older developers in the room. So here's a picture of me when I was really little to form this emotional connection even further. Now you like me. This is the team I work with. This is my designer, Tim. This is other people that I work with. We work on Remix and React Router. Today I'm going to be talking about React Router version 8 and beyond. So why do we do major versions? Let's just step back and talk about major versions and just open source software as a whole. So major versions are very important because we like breaking things, we want to ruin your day, and we hate you. Just kidding. No, really, there's kind of this idea in open source where you can keep building new features all you want, but as we've seen with the advent of vibe coding, you can make features all you want, and then you just create more bugs, right? So at some point, you do need to clean up the slop, clean up the mess, clean up just the old things that aren't working as well, or you maybe have come up with a new idea, and so old things are deprecated, and things need to march forward. And so major versions are a chance for us to kind of pull back the lever and focus a little bit on stability for a second. So really, the reasons for major versions is to remove cruft, stabilize the new, and to communicate direction. Let's talk about React Router's history. There's still definitely confusion about this, and we haven't made it easy on anyone. And so, yeah, I figured it might be good to just take a second and talk about React Router as a whole, where it came from, how it intersects with Remix, what that all means. So in the beginning was the Florence, and the Florence was with the routers, and the Florence was the routers. But God knew it was not good for Florence to be alone, so he gave him the Jackson. And together, Michael and Ryan built React Router, and they released the first version in November 2015. And to give you some perspective, I was about this old when they released that. So that's a joke. I would be 11 right now. Then the remixing happening, so they did some major versions and pissed people off because they did break things as they were learning how to do open source as they were going. But in 2020, they were able to focus fully on software. They quit their training business, rather COVID quit it for them, and focused fully on building a full stack framework, which is called Remix, initially closed source, but then they open sourced it and continued to work on React Router 6. They had a full team, so they were able to really invest a lot of attention to it and not do such painful breaking changes. They also were able to remix React Router and bring a lot of the great APIs that Remix had and bring them back into React Router. And then they were able to actually React Router Remix, and they were able to rebuild Remix on top of React Router. So we kept on going back and forth and building up. Both these projects were leaning on each other and built on each other in such a way that we eventually got Remix v2, which is like kind of our best version of what Remix was. And then we realized these two things are so similar, and we're relying on V, so it's really just a V plugin. So what's the difference between these? We should probably just combine these two projects. And then I came along and wrote a blog post that made everybody really mad, and we talked about how we were merging Remix into React Router, and everyone said we're idiots and we shouldn't have done that, and we're going to ruin the brand. And so Ryan had to come along and write another blog post to try and help smooth things over. If you're still reeling from this, if you're still really mad, here's another picture of me as a baby so that you can like me again. So React Router, another way to think about the history and the development of React Router, it started out as this really small library for doing client-side routing. Basically, the whole idea of React Router was to stop us from breaking the back button when we were doing single-page apps. But then came along data mode, which is basically the functionality that allowed us to build Remix. It's these data loaders and handlers so that when you're doing your routing, you can also do data fetching at the same time, which is a really nice way to build an application. So lots of people use data mode to build their own kind of frameworks in-house to do server-side rendering and all this kind of stuff. And so the framework mode is really just a V plugin on top of data mode. So these concentric circles build on top of each other, and this is exactly how we build framework mode. And so that's kind of why we combined it all together. Another way to think about it is to think about it as like a Git tree. So React Router is this big, long-lived main branch that we're developing, and then we wanted to build a meta framework on top of React. And so we branched off and made Remix, and then we had a long-lived feature branch, so we kept on building, but we would cherry-pick things back into React Router, and eventually we got to this point where it was just good to upmerge it. And that allowed us to do something new with the Remix brand, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but go a separate direction than React. React Router framework mode seems to be doing pretty well. NPM download numbers are kind of, they're fun to look at, but don't take like too much interest in them. Don't keep ogling them every day. That's not really good for your mental health. But they're good for directionality. So we've hit over 100 million, or sorry, over 1 million weekly downloads on React Router like framework mode, which is really cool. As you can see, Remix has kind of the old version has like plateaued, which is great. So this is not just like adoption. This is also new adoptions. Of course, this is totally dwarfed by how many people actually use React Router, which is like over 40 million weekly downloads. So yeah, React Router is still very popular, going to be here for a while, and we're going to continue investing in it, which is why we actually switched to an open governance model. So instead of Ryan and Michael deciding features and then telling us to build them, we instead want the community to be telling us what they think is valuable and to be engaging a lot more with the actual open governance, not just the open sourceness of it. So open governance is pretty simple. It looks like this. This is our feature process. Anyone can write a proposal. That's an RFC. If it gets a lot of upvotes, then we'll start paying attention to it because that's a signal that, OK, the community wants this thing. We'll consider it. The steering committee will consider it, and I'll talk about the steering committee in just a second. And then we'll open it up and say anyone can build an alpha, or we might build the alpha. And if we like the code and we feel like it's good, we'll turn it into a beta, and that'll be released in a major version, or sorry, in a minor version, but with an unstable flag, so anyone can try it out. Once we feel good about that, after about a month of stabilization, we'll then mark it as stable, and then it'll be a stable feature from there on out. The steering committee is made up of Matt Brophy, Pedro Catori, Mark Daglish, Jacob Eby, and hey, that's my name. And we are, from the Remix team, helping and building React Router still. So that's the main focus from the Remix team of how we focus on this. We have a bi-weekly meeting with these two wonderful individuals, Sergio Zalambri and Brian Ross. These are outside contributors. They don't work at Shopify. They don't work on Remix. They've built a lot of things in the community. They built open source projects and whatnot. And we trust them a lot. Their input is really invaluable. And they've built a lot with React Router. So we are allowing outside contributors kind of to weigh in on these meetings. So we meet every other week, and we discuss new proposals. And then if we get enough upvotes, if we get two, I think, steering committee members to agree on something, then we'll say, hey, this is open for an alpha version to be built. How's this gone? It's gone pretty well. Here's a really old issue that Ryan had written, or a proposal, and it never gained traction. But once we had the steering committee, this was like #1. We voted on it and said it was good. And then someone in the community, not one of our members, went and made the first alpha of it. And I've used this feature, and I'll be using it in just a little bit. Background locations with modal was another good example of something people needed, like if you're working on Unsplash or whatever. I'll show an example of this as well. This was something really needed, so we were able to consider it, and then we built a version for it. Same with opting out of start transition. This is a React feature that causes a problem for certain applications, so we needed a way to opt you out of that, and so we built that too. And then observability, being able to do open telemetry, this was really, really needed. And this one took a lot of discussion with the community to figure out how exactly to do this. Even Brian tried to implement it and fell on his face a little bit, but he definitely discovered what not to do, which was incredibly valuable for us figuring out the right IPA. Not a beer. What API? That's it. I've even contributed with React Router V8. I opened up the discussion for this, and we discussed what we wanted to implement and what we wanted to remove. So with removing the CRUF, what are we actually removing in React Router version 8? We're removing this old data type that we had, so this is like very unimportant, but if you're upgrading, you'll probably have seen these deprecations. Very simple, but we tried to do this early on so that people had plenty of time to remove this thing. It's just the same change. We are making Node 22 the minimum version. We always take the LTS version of Node and we make that the minimum. That point 12 is very important because that allows us to drop CJS builds and go ESM only and keep moving the ecosystem forward. We're also making React 19 the minimum version going forward, and React 8, again, just moving everything forward. This helps us. Honestly, if you're upgrading, you're not going to experience much. 18 to 19 is very easy, but internally, in order to make 18 and 19 both viable React options, it's actually a lot more work internally. So this allows us to remove a lot of complexity internally, which is great. And then we're also making Beat 7 the minimum supported version so that we can use the environments API. We can lean on that. That's pretty much all we broke, except for the fact that we have future flags. So if you're not familiar, future flags in React Router are a way to they're a way for us to give you new features that do have breaking changes, but allow you to opt into them so that you can opt into them over time. And you don't have to wait until the new major version and do everything all at once. So we only have a few future flags. We have the Beat environment API. That one's pretty simple. Split route modules, probably not going to experience a big breakage there. And I'll talk about it in a second. Middleware, that has some breaking APIs, but there's a way to like upgrade it to where you don't even have to break anything. So you can check out the docs on that and then pass their requests. New features, when we have major versions, we don't often get to talk about the old features or the new features because we're talking about like all the things we're breaking. But I figure this is a good time just to say all the different things that we have introduced. And there's way more things than I can even talk about here. Mostly it's focused on type safety and RSC support and sub-resource integrity, all these different things. But all in all, we had 40 plus releases of React Router in the past year and a half. So React Router is very much not dead as we are focusing a little bit on Remix as well. So I know, yeah, we're basically vibe coding everything all the time right now, right? But I figured, yeah, it'd be good to maybe get in the code a little bit, go old school, and just see how some of these features work. Is that cool? Can I code a little? All right, cool. So the first thing I need to do is I need to run the dev server on this one so we can see it. So we have this problem, if you're familiar with React Router, we have all these like special exports for our route modules in the framework mode. And the thing is, you might have like a really small client loader and a really, really heavy like component, like with all these charts and stuff. And the problem is, right now, if you try to download all of those, you have to wait until the entire JavaScript module loads before you can even start fetching your data, and that is not a good experience. What that looks like in the network tab is, clear all this. If you go to split route modules demo, you can see, if we zoom in on the waterfall here, let me see if I can zoom this up. We have to wait until, hold on, let me do that one more time. There we go. We have to wait until the entire route downloads all its JavaScript before it kicks off the fetch and then actually fetches the data. So that's not great, but with just the flip of a single split route modules flag, and we start the prod server. Now it splits up that route into a bunch of different little chunks, which is really cool. So like the client loader is able to load on its own, and the composer is able to load on its own. It can kick off that data request as soon as the client loader is finished. This is really valuable for like really like the Shopify admin, something that's really, really client heavy and has a lot of client loaders. This is actually the inspiration for us making this. So this is a nice little feature that you should get for free. And the upgrade is very, very simple. You could turn it on today. All right, let's talk about middleware. So middleware was a long requested feature. I gotta go to this one. Long requested feature. We wanted a way that you could kind of interject, like when a request is happening, so you could do some work before all your loaders load, and then you could set up some context so that each loader could read into that. So right now I have this really dumb example where we're just counting how many times you've reloaded this document, via either a document or a client-side request. And so right now to do that, let me go to this one. Right now to do that, we're just doing it inside of a loader. And it's kind of annoying because you have to, we're using a cookie for this, and you have to set the header every single time inside your loader. And so if you wanted to share this logic across different loaders, you'd have to set the cookie in every single loader. That's kind of a weird experience. Plus, you don't have a shared context in which other loaders can talk to each other. So we're going to use middleware to make this better. So the first thing to do is turn on the middleware. And then the next thing to do is we're going to set up our state. There we go, or our context rather. And here we can just read from the context. Oops, not is context, context. And this is already type safe, which is really great. And if this context hasn't been set up, we'll get an error on this side, so it'll just throw. So let's go ahead and set up that context. So we're going to set up the middlewares, and then this analytics middleware, perfect. She's going to write it all for me, which is great. So we are using AI, I guess, a little bit. But basically, your middleware, it's type safe with this route little type that we have. You get a request, you get context, and then you can call next whenever you want to process the next request. So here we can create our state, we can set it in context, and here we're just reading from it in context, which is awesome. So this still works exactly as it did before. And now instead of setting the header down here, we can go ahead and set it up here. So we can say the response is the wait next, and then response is, yep, there we go. We're going to append the cookie there and just return the response. And we can pretty much just delete all this stuff and make our loader really just focused on loading data and not setting cookies. Great, so that works perfectly. That's exactly what we want. All right. With this example, it doesn't work exactly. Those other numbers are not going up. We want all numbers to go up all the time, always, no matter what. And so we want to differentiate between document requests and client-side requests. This is not something you could do in React Router before, but now it's super, super easy. So we're just going to pull in the V8 pass-through requests. And this changes our request URL. So I'm going to just console log so we can console log this so we can see it. So now if I reload the document, you can see it's middleware-context, but if I reload like a client-side loader, you actually get this .data. This is how React Router has worked for a long time. You kind of need to have this differentiation when you're doing server-side rendering, but then you're hydrating and doing a spa router on top of it. So we had this before, but you as a user didn't have a really good way to distinguish between those. But now you do. You have a very, very easy way to do it, which is super cool. So you can get the path name out of your URL, and then if it ends with data, we'll +1 on the client views. Otherwise, we'll do the document views. And now all the numbers go up like we want. And now we're going to be rich because we can distinguish between these two. Awesome. All right, what's next? And yeah, definitely running out of time. All right, fetcher reset and should revalidate. So with fetchers, if you're familiar with fetchers, they're really cool in React Router. You can fetch them, you can hold state, you can send back state with the fetcher, you can see the progress of how your fetcher is going. We also added a feature, I'll just talk about really quickly, with fetchers, where you can actually give a key to a fetcher, and so anytime this fetcher, or any fetcher is used with that key, they're all sharing from the same state, which is really nice way to coordinate different fetchers. So I'm using this one in multiple places, which is why I have it exported here. So that's just a throwaway, that's just a gimme, you got that one for free. And so with the fetchers, we have this create an issue example. So we're going to say new issue, blah, blah, blah. We're going to create something. And here I want this little dialogue thing to pop up, this little toast to pop up. But if I go between these different ones, it's still there, which is kind of nice because I want to hold that state. But I need some way to dismiss it. So before, you didn't really have a good way to programmatically dismiss a fetcher, but we've made that really easy. So with an on-click, you can just say fetcher.reset. Super easy like that, which is great. So we're going to do another one, and now we can just dismiss it, or if we view it, we can view it, which is great. So you didn't have that before, and it's just a little nice feature that we added. Another nice feature that we added, and this was one that was contributed by someone outside of our team through that proposal process that I showed, is with default revalidation. So by default, if I go between these different pages, I'm reloading the data every time. Sometimes that's what you want, sometimes it's not what you want. Sometimes you only want to load, or you want more control over loading the data. We've always had an export called default should revalidate, but now we allow you to have a call site should revalidate option. So with all these nav links, I'm just going to say default should revalidate is false. So the default experience is false. And there's other ways to override this that I'm not going to get into because I don't have enough time. So you have a little bit more focusability on this. And so if I give this a refresh and clear these, every time I go between these, I'm just reloading the favicon because that's how that works. But I'm not reloading the data, which is really nice. So we've given you a little bit more fine-grained ability to change that. Cool. What's this next one? Link masking, link masking is a long requested feature. So sometimes you have this experience where you want to pull up a modal, but if you shared this link with someone or you refresh, you want it to go to the full page, right? So right now, if I refresh, it's still the modal experience, so that's not great. So the way that we solve this one is we gave you one little thing on your links and your nav links and whatnot, where you can say mask equals whatever you want the URL to look like in the URL, even though really the two underneath, it's being masked. It's actually going to this query param. So what does this look like in practice? If I click the button, now you can see it's no longer a query string. It's actually a full URL. So now if I refresh, I get to the full page. So just this one little feature was like many years, several months and maybe even years in development. But it's very nice, and we're happy with it. The last one is instrumentation. I'm not going to talk about this too much because I don't want to do a coding example of it because it's too hard. But basically, you have all sorts of ways to intersect different routes, operations, errors, actions, etc. And this is just through a simple little instrumentations array that you can set up all these different instrumentations. And on each side of them, you have client and you have server instrumentations. You get a handler, and you can instrument and record all these events. You can Whenever a route is loading, you can call, you get control over when you call the loader, so you can set up timers to say how long the loader took. So you get all this kind of ability to create these really sophisticated instrumentation details. So just another nice improvement. Sweet. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that I did build all these examples with AI, and the way I did that is we have some skills, and they're really easy to use, and they're really nice, and so I just plugged the skill in, and I knew exactly what to do, and it didn't get confused with the other versions of React Router. So if you're concerned about it thinking that you're in data mode when you're in framework mode, pretty solved issue. All you have to do is ask your LLM, hey, give me some skills for React Router, and it will figure out how to find them for you. Okay, RSC, I didn't really talk about RSC much, so I'll talk about it now, because I have so much time to talk about it. That's a lie. So RC is really easy to use. So the way that you add it is, right now this is unstable, but soon it'll be stable. You just add this different plugin, and then you're going to also import the RSC plugin and the React plugin. And then you're just going to add these, and now it works. Oh, we gotta make sure before I embarrass myself. All right. So yeah, everything just works fine, which is great. You have to do a little bit to set up like the server, but I'm not gonna worry about that too much. Well, we can just do it, it's really easy. You just delete a bunch of things. And then you say, yeah, you do that, you do server build, and then here, oh, I deleted too many things. This is why you don't live code. Yeah, that was it. Okay, you just take the server build and you just do server build.default.fetch. Cool, so it's really easy, just read docs or ask your LLM too. Let's be honest, no one's reading docs, right? So yeah, I didn't change anything. This actually isn't using server components, but I'm now enabled to use server components if I want, which is really great. So what does this look like? I have a good example where we're using suspense. Aurora showed us like how to use all these awesome features, so now you can use whatever you want. So in this example, we have this crazy thing where we're like sending down a promise and whatnot. So we can just, instead of doing that, we can just pull this up, and we're just going to render the loader data. And so inside of our loader, we can just get rid of that. And we can return this thing instead, and this can just be stats. So now we're just returning JSX from our loader, and it works exactly like you want. So that's a server component. But if we're going to go that far, we might as well just make this a function, or even an async function maybe. Yeah, we'll just call it stats, and then it'll figure it all out. And yep, that's all right, perfect. See, we don't even need to think, it's great. So that's the stats, and then yeah, you can just return, you can call the stats and just return it. We can delete this one, and that's great. So now this works. Yeah, you have RC, that's awesome. But even, what are we doing? Why do we even have a loader at this point? That's ridiculous. Let's get rid of that. And let's go down wherever we were calling our loader data. And here we can just call stats. Awesome, it works, yeah. All right, cool, so you have RC. This is our store that's built entirely on RSC, and this one even uses the actions, like server actions, as well as server components. So you have the full capability of it. This is React Server Components fully. So if you go to like a page, you can see a little, yeah, there we go. And then if I add to cart, I'm gonna clear this and add to cart, this is an RSC payload that you get back. So this is completely built on React Router server components. So we're very, very close to stabilizing that. We've been working on it for a while, but it's exactly how you would expect it to work. It's exactly how the docs of React want RSC to work. So yeah, that's there. Yeah, communicating direction, that's the final piece of why we do major versions, or the beyond part. And the nice thing about server components, even if you don't use them, I really don't use them a lot, they're actually making things a lot simpler for us. So the amount of work that we have to do to make framework mode is so much smaller because React server components and all the protocols and whatnot kind of swallow all that up for us, which is really, really awesome. So that's React Router. It's coming out next month, version 8, that is. You may be wondering, what about Remix? You're wearing a Remix shirt. When's that coming? If you promise not to, well, if you promise if what I'm about to say is a lie, to only yell at me and no one else on my team, then I'll let you know that we are planning on releasing our beta next week. And you also may be wondering, well, you're talking about these two different projects. How do I decide which one I want? So I made a flowchart. And I know I'm over time, but this is worth it. Do you need something stable and battle tested? Just pick React Router. It's already stable and battle tested. It's 12 years old. It's great. Please use it. We are continuing to develop it. We have the steering committee. I could not have made this talk if we were not releasing really awesome stuff in it. But if not, the next question is, do you want to use React and have full control over whichever of its features you need to use? React Router is an awesome, awesome, awesome library for that and framework for that. It's built on React. It will always be built on React. It will always use all of the React features. That is like our commitment. We're not going to try and steer away from React. We're going to try and adopt what React has and make it as best as we possibly can. But maybe you don't care about React necessarily, or you're open to something different. I know we're at a React conf, so like kind of controversial, but whatever. Maybe you're not so sure. Well, the final question I would have is, do you think that the advent of agentic coding means that React is the last framework trademark and there's no point ever trying to think again, and you should just go with the status quo because of training data, and nothing can ever be improved upon or explored in the field of software development ever again? If you think that statement's true, then yeah, just use React Router. It's good. It's done. It's already in the training data. You're good. Otherwise, maybe give Remix a look. Thank you so much.